Here to discuss the Republican plan of action for November is Liz Harrington, the national spokesperson for the RNC. Liz, when we talk about the idea of Biden picking a black vice president, a female vice president at that, what does the Republican Party necessarily respond to that as? Is it a good move for him, or is it kind of something that is more of a platitude, something that he's making really early on, acknowledging the past mistakes that he's made when it comes to racial relations?
Well, he's certainly been dragged very far to the left throughout this process, and now he seems to be playing identity politics where it doesn't really matter what the record of the candidate is. It just has to check certain boxes. And I think that sells the American people short. We should be asking for someone who can actually lead and has the record to do so. Joe Biden certainly doesn't. We've seen his record of almost 50 years in Washington with no real results for the Black community, and contrast that with President Trump, who accomplished so much before this pandemic hit in such a short amount of time, really delivering real results for the American people. So at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who he picks. We should judge their record, but certainly the record at the top of the ticket has a lot to be desired for.
And even in the past, I don't think many Americans vote on who the vice president is. And it's a little bit weird this election cycle that even the candidate himself is saying that his VP will be a bigger role than in the past. I mean, it's almost admitting to the idea that he doesn't necessarily want to take or can take on the responsibilities of the office, and says that whoever is next in line has that much more importance. It's kind of a weird argument to be making right now by the candidate himself. But I do want to pivot to the convention as well. Of course, we now know that it's going to be taking place in Jacksonville as well as partially in Charlotte as well. But what does that decision mean? I've heard it be talked a lot in the media, but does it have significance when it comes to the actual campaign itself?
It's very important to show that our country's open up for business again. And we're very excited that Jacksonville will be our landing spot for the main celebratory event. We'll still have a presence in Charlotte. It's unfortunate that the Democrat governor there just really slow walk this whole process, would not work with us to give us any sort of flexibility when we're talking about keeping the convention goers safe, but also at a capacity that we were under contract for. So it's indicative, I think, of a lot of Democratic-run states where you see they've really held their workers back. They've slow walked this whole process. In contrast to Florida, which we're really happy to be working with Governor DeSantis and Mayor Curry of Jacksonville, because they prioritize the needs of Floridians. They focused on the vulnerable. They built up hospital capacity, and they allowed the American people and the residents of their state the respect they deserve to make these decisions for themselves and open up safely in the way they see fit. So we're very excited to be have a presence in both states, and I think it really shows quite a contrast between the two parties come November.
And we talk about North Carolina and we talk about Florida, and those are going to be two swing states come 2020. I mean, they're going to be crucial states if whoever wins the presidency. But when we look at those two governors, they've also approached the lockdowns very differently. You were talking about DeSantis, Cooper right there, and how they're going about this very differently. Is that going to be a big campaign issue in these swing states, differentiating the ways that Republican governors and Democratic governors have handled these lockdowns?
Absolutely. I think the American people are seeing just how much we may have taken our fundamental freedoms for granted. And I think it's a real big slap in the face as well that you see these Democratic governors who are so heavy-handed against small business owners and churchgoers, people playing t-ball with their daughters in empty parks, all these sorts of really infringement on our normal everyday lives. And then when fringe, far-left radical elements started burning down buildings and innocent people's property. You had law enforcement officers shot. Where was the heavy-handedness there? And you had Governor Cooper joining the march in the street with thousands of people who have every right to peacefully protest, but yet he didn't have the disdain of the shaming of lack of social distance that he had when it comes to Republicans wanting to bring economic investment into his state come the end of August. So the hypocrisy is stunning, it's jarring, and I think the American people are really fed up with the playing of politics with our lives, which you've really seen Democrats do in all of these different states.
And it's not only the politicians as well, it's also the members of the media who are treating the protest very differently depending on what the cause is behind these protests. And I think you're right to say that the American people are smarter than a lot of people give them credit for. They see through this stuff and they see through the hypocrisy as well. But Liz Harrington, I appreciate you coming on tonight, breaking down the elections for us. Thank you.